We've arrived. Suddenly, a voice entered into the ears of Duan Ling Tian, who was immersed in the comprehension of wind concept, and it caused him to seem as if jolted awake from a dream. After Duan Ling Tian awakened, he noticed that he'd already arrived at a familiar gorge. When he saw the ball of gases that seemed like a cloud or mist, Duan Ling Tian completely reacted to his whereabouts. This place wasn't unfamiliar to him, and he'd come here twice in the past. The first time was with Feng Wu Dao, Feng Tian Wu, and Elder Kong. At that time, his target was the Soul Cleanse Pool. After that, he'd found an underwater abode within the Soul Cleanse Pool, and he'd obtained a soul brand that allowed him to grasp a soul skill that belonged to himself, the soul skill 1000 Illusions. The second time he came here was for the sake of fleeing for his life. At that time, he'd been taken hostage by the traitor of the Seven-Star Sword sect, Zhao Ming, and the Azure Forest Trisex Guardian Elder, Tang Huo, and he outwitted them by bringing them here and trapping them within the inscription formation. Uncle Feng, Tian Wu, Elder Kong. All of you wait here for me, I'll return after dealing with them. Duan Ling Tian smiled at Feng Wu Dao's group of 3 before walking towards the ball of cloud and mist that had been compressed together, or more precisely speaking, he'd walked towards the completely sealed inscription formation, and that ball of mist and cloud was only the outward appearance of the formation. When he left the Crimson Sky Kingdom, Duan Ling Tian had notified Feng Wu Dao and asked Feng Wu Dao to bring him here, whereas, Feng Wu Dao was familiar with this place, so he easily arrived here. Duan Ling Tian's eyes squinted when he approached the ball of cloud and mist that had been compressed together, and his acute spiritual force swept out to easily break it open. More precisely speaking, he'd opened the inscription formation. Whirlwind. Before the inscription formation had completely opened, Duan Ling Tian had already transformed into a gust of wind that instantly entered into it like an agile rabbit. Whoosh! Duan Ling Tian once again appeared outside the Soul Cleanse Pool, and his gaze descended to a spot nearby at the first possible moment. There were 2 old men with faces covered with stubble there, and they were looking at the direction Duan Ling Tian came in with overjoyed expressions. Their gazes seemed as if they'd grabbed onto a life-saving straw. But the expressions of those 2 old men changed quickly as boundless ruthlessness suffused their faces when their gazes descended onto Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian. One of the old men shouted out in a grim voice, and his voice was filled with hatred. He's been trapped within here for the past few years, and it caused his life to be worse than death. Normally, he could only eat weeds to allay his hunger, and it was simply like the difference between the heavens and the earth when compared with his life of luxury from before. Because of this, he'd even thought of ending his life, yet he didn't have the courage in the end. Of course, the most important reason that drove him to continue living was because he wanted to tear apart the kid that trapped him here that day. Originally, he thought that he wouldn't have any hope to take revenge in his entire lifetime. Yet today, not only had the inscription formation that trapped him been opened up, there was even someone that entered after it opened, and this person was precisely the person he hated the most. Duan Ling Tian. I won't let you escape again today. You're dead. The other old man seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that instantly appeared behind Duan Ling Tian, and he launched a pincer attack at Duan Ling Tian with the other old man that was before Duan Ling Tian. Elder Huo, are you so sure? Duan Ling Tian turned around to glance deeply at the red-clothed old man that stood behind him, and then the corners of his mouth curled into a ridiculing smile. The red-clothed old man was precisely the guardian elder of the former Azure Forest Tri-sect, Tang Huo. After many years, Tang Huo wasn't elegant and unrestrained as before, and he looked like an old geezer that didn't have the slightest bearing of an expert. Die. Tang Huo exploded into rage from being underestimated by Duan Ling Tian, and the origin energy on his body skyrocketed as fire concept followed his origin energy like a shadow, causing him to seem as if he'd transformed into a ball of flame that swept aggressively towards Duan Ling Tian. His ability as a 6th-level Void Initiation stage martial artist was revealed completely. Elder Huo, a few years have passed yet you haven't improved in the slightest. Truly a pity. Duan Ling Tian's expression remained unchanged when facing Tang Huo's aggressive attack, and at the same time that he spoke out in ridicule, Duan Ling Tian casually pointed out twice in the air before him. Swish! Swish! Instantly, two piercing howls resounded out as material origin energy point force accompanied by a strand of azure-colored energy and violet-colored energy tore through the sky, and it caused the airflow in the sky to surge and violet gales to blow in all directions. Pu. Pu. Two light sounds accompanied by muffled groans sounded out. Subsequently, the nearby Zhao Ming saw an unforgettable scene. Heavens! What have I seen? Tang Huo, an existence who possessed a strength equal to him, had attacked out with his full strength. Yet Tang Huo hadn't even touched Duan Ling Tian before his legs were penetrated by the 2-point forces that Duan Ling Tian casually shot out. Bang! After his legs were penetrated, Tang Huo forcefully endured the intense pain and let out a muffled groan while his body trembled. Meanwhile, Tang Huo still gritted his teeth and withdrew his spirit weapon before pouncing towards Duan Ling Tian like a wild beast that had opened its bloody mouth and revealed its fangs. The spirit weapon tore through the sky while accompanied by an even stronger strength as it swept towards Duan Ling Tian, and the origin energy that covered the skies like surging flames seemed as if they wanted to swallow Duan Tian completely. Duan Tian stood on the spot and looked at Tang Huo's final struggle with interest. In his eyes, Tang Huo was indeed making a final struggle now. Tempest Point. Along with Duan Tian pointing out once more, another Tempest Point swept out, and at the instant a piercing howl sounded out. The spirit weapon in Tang Huo's hand was directly blasted flying by the energy of the Tempest Point, whereas the hand Tang Huo held his spirit weapon with had been blasted to the point it dripped with blood, and intense pain caused Tang Huo's countenance to go pale to the extreme as he barely stopped his body and looked at Duan Tian in panic. No. Impossible. Impossible. How many years have passed? How could you possibly possess such a formidable strength? Tang Huo looked at Duan Tian with a gaze filled with terror, and his tone contained traces of trembling. Whoosh! Right at this moment, the energy of the heavens and earth that swept out in the sky above Duan Tian had finally started formed into numerous ancient horned dragon silhouettes. First were 12 ancient horned dragon silhouettes, and then another 8 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared before another 3 ancient horned dragon silhouettes appeared. 9th level of the Void Initiation Stage. 8th level Wind Concept. 3rd level Lightning Concept. This was the strength Duan Tian had utilized when making a move against Tang Huo. 9th level. 9th level of the Void Initiation Stage. When Tang Huo saw the ancient horned dragon silhouettes that appeared in the sky above Duan Tian, his body couldn't help but tremble as his countenance went ghastly pale to the extreme, and he was terrified to the point he couldn't speak clearly. Tang Huo, you first participated in the battle to annihilate my 7-star sword sect, and you even wanted to kill me later on. Now, I'll send you on your way and allow you to accompany Long Wei, Xuerui, and the others in the netherworld. Duan Tian spoke slowly. At this moment, Tang Huo's pupils constricted when he heard Duan Tian, and his voice started to tremble slightly. You are Azure Forest Trisect. Tang Huo didn't continue speaking because he'd obtained the answer he wanted from Duan Tian's cold and indifferent gaze. Tang Huo's countenance was ghastly pale, and his breathing was slightly hurried as he pointed at Duan Tian and said, Duan Tian, you were lucky since you annihilated the Azure Forest Trisect before our demonic Lotus Blade sect's ancestor re-emerged into the world. Otherwise, once the ancestor re-emerged, the one that died would have surely been you. Tang Huo was a guardian elder of the demonic Lotus Blade sect before the 3 sects had combined together. Ancestor. Duan Tian suddenly started laughing, and he laughed brilliantly. The ancestor you mentioned is probably that Jia Hong, right? you know. Tang Huo frowned, and then he said with a cold voice, if the ancestor re-emerged in time, then even if you're already a 9th level void initiation stage martial artist, you'll be dead without a doubt. But unfortunately, you've escaped calamity. Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Duan Lingtian smiled lightly. I watched the ancestor you spoke of, Jia Hong, emerge from the fire breath rock. I have to say, his strength was extremely strong, and I'm far from being a match for him. What? The ancestor re-emerged. Tang Huo's pupils constricted. But the following words Duan Lingtian spoke caused the paleness of his countenance to go deeper, and then his expression turned to one of astonishment and disbelief. But unfortunately, he still died. Do you think that if your Azure Forest Trisect has someone to rely on, I don't have someone to rely on? When Duan Lingtian's smile entered into Tang Huo's eyes, it was no different than the smile of a devil. So you can peacefully go to hell and see your ancestor. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, his finger that had been accumulating force since long ago pointed out. Swish! The tempest point tore through the sky and gave rise to a wave of fierce piercing howls before directly penetrating the spot between Tang Huo's brows and killing Tang Huo. Bang! Tang Huo's corpse dropped to the ground, yet his eyes were still wide open as he died with everlasting regret. When the sound of Tang Huo's corpse dropping to the ground entered into the nearby Zhao Ming's ears, it caused Zhao Ming's expression to go completely pale. At this moment, the rage he had when facing Duan Lingtian earlier had vanished completely, and replacing it was terror and uneasiness. Never had he imagined that after a few years, Duan Lingtian would actually possess such a terrifying strength, a strength that caused even him to look up to. It was even to the extent that Duan Lingtian had even annihilated the Azure Forest Trisect. After he retrieved Tang Huo's spatial ring, Duan Lingtian turned around to look at the old man who stood dumbstruck nearby, and his gaze instantly went cold. Zhao Ming. Duan Lingtian's voice seemed to have come from the netherworld, and it carried frightful coldness with it. At the same time, Duan Lingtian strode over step by step toward the old man that possessed an extremely unsightly expression, Zhao Ming. Zhao Ming was one of the guardian elders of the former Seven-Star Sword sect and people called him Elder Ming. Later on, when the Seven-Star Sword sect encountered a calamity, Zhao Ming had viciously backstabbed the strongest martial artist in the Seven-Star Sword sect, Elder Xian, and his actions caused the situation that could be in a stalemate for some time to instantly crumble. The Seven-Star Sword sect was easily annihilated by the Azure Forest Trisect. All those years ago when Duan Lingtian had first found out about all this, he had the impulse to tear Zhao Ming into pieces. but unfortunately, his cultivation was far inferior to Zhao Ming at that time. Yet now, he'd come. He'd come along with the blood enmity of all the souls of the dead from the Seven-Star Sword sect, and he carried with him a strength that far surpassed Zhao Ming to appear mightily before Zhao Ming with the sole reason of collecting a debt. This was a debt Zhao Ming owed the Seven-Star Sword sect.